Hello, once again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our virtual meeting. What's special about this recording is that obviously we don't have any Zoom meetings today, and so this is our lesson for today. So it's going to be a little bit different and yet very similar to other videos if you have seen these before. But anyways, before we begin, so today we are going to be focusing on the assignment found under week 17. So this is week 17. We go down to Thursday, and it's right there, proportion word problems. And so click on that one. Your view should look something like this. Just click start new attempt and let us begin. But before we begin, I do want to remind you of the notes that we took on the 8th, I believe it was. Those were number 37, when we first talked about equivalent ratios. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, that when we're looking at a word problem, there's three things that we must do. Three things that we must do in this order. All right, so looking at this word problem, which we did do, the ratio of boys to girls is 3 to 2. If there are 12 boys, how many girls are there? And this is not one of the problems from Schoology. This is just the problem we did before, right? But the three things that we should do is, number one, we needed to write down the fraction in words, the ratio in words. That fraction tells me what are the two things, what are the two variables that I'm comparing? What are the two variables that you are comparing? And so in this example problem, we were comparing boys to girls. And so you would physically write down boys to girls. Ladies and gentlemen, I know a lot of you are going to be tempted to skip this step, but ladies and gentlemen, again, this is the most important step, to write down the fraction in words. If you do not do this, I promise you, you are going to get confused at some point. But now that I know that whatever number I have up here, if it has to do with boys, it's going to be on the numerator. If it has to do with girls, it's going to be on the denominator. Our second step was simply to line up the given ratio with the word fraction. That just means what ratio of boys to girls is given to you. Here we have 3 boys to 2 girls. So right next to the word fraction in the numerator, I'm going to write 3 for the boys and 2 for the girls. That's all of what that means. Up to this point, I haven't really done any math. I'm just organizing the information, right? And then number 3, I would use the remaining information, in other words, the 12 boys, to write an equivalent fraction. All right, an equivalent fraction lined up with the word fraction here. So the 12 boys, because it's boys, it would go in the numerator along with the other numbers that have to do with the boys. And I would use either the cross products or multiply by a certain factor to find the equivalent ratio to 3 halves. However, now having 12 boys on the numerator. That's pretty much it. And I'm not going to go ahead and work out this problem. I just wanted to remind you of how to set this up. Another thing that we're going to be using quite a bit is actually our lesson from yesterday, which was solving cross products. And again, I just want to remind you really quickly, it would be valuable to have that open as well. And remember that cross products is simply where we make an equation. Our goal is to make an equation where on one side of the equation, for example, if I have 5 over 4 is equal to 10x, one side of the equation is made up of one of the cross products, so 5x. Notice how I have 5x on one side. And the other side of the equation is going to be made up of the other cross product, which in this case will be 4 times 10. So 5x is equal to 4 times 10. And then I will just use simple algebra, the things that I've learned so far, to isolate the variable. So I have an equation, the opposite of multiplication is division, and then I would find the missing value. So we're definitely going to be using that today. All right, enough of that. So having said that, let's go to number 1 here in our assignment, and let's read. If 2 pounds of meat will serve 5 people, how many pounds will be needed to serve 13 people? Okay, honestly, looking at that, that means nothing to me. So let's go ahead and circle the important information so that we can come up with a word fraction. What are the two things that we're comparing? So if 2 pounds of meat will serve 5 people. Okay, those seem to be my two variables, pounds of meat and people. How many pounds? So how many pounds of meat will we need to serve 13 people? Okay, pounds of meat and people seem to be my two variables, so I'm going to physically write down pounds of meat, and I'm going to have that in my numerator. So I'm just going to put LB, which means pounds of meat, on the numerator, and on the denominator, I'm going to put people. As long as you understand what goes where, it doesn't really matter what you write. You could have written pounds, you could have written served, whatever, but I think pounds of meat and people is the best thing to do here. All right, so let's write down the given ratio. We have 2 pounds of meat for 5 people. So 2 over 5, and that is my ratio. And now let's write our equivalent ratio with whatever other information is given here. And so we're trying to find out how many pounds. So pounds, we don't know how many pounds. For 13 people, 13 is people, goes on the denominator. Oh, that's a 12. That's not a 13. 13 people. Awesome. So let's go ahead and use cross products to make an equation here, because I don't know what 5 times what gives me 13. So I'm going to make an equation using the cross product. So I'm going to multiply 5 times x, and that's going to be on one side. 5 and x is going to be on one side. And then 2 times 13 is going to go on another side. All right, 2 times 13. And if you already know what that is, you can just write it, but I'm going to physically write exactly what I'm doing. 2 times 13 is going to go on the other side, which we know that's 26. So really, our equation is going to be 5x is equal to 26. Awesome. Now let's just solve the equation. All right, whenever we're solving equations, we need to always, say it with me, isolate the variable, right? So we want the x to be by itself. So that means that we need to get rid of this multiplication by 5. The opposite of multiplying by 5 is to divide by 5. And guys, we're always going to focus on the side. We're always going to focus on the side with the variable. All right, it doesn't matter what's in the other side without the variable right now. We're just focusing on the side with the variable. And so, again, the opposite of multiplying by 5 is to divide by 5. And when I do that, I have now isolated the variable. X is by itself. However, whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. So I must divide the other side by 5. So x will equal whatever 26 divided by 5 is. I'm going to work that off here on the side. 26 divided by 5. 5 goes into 26 5 times, because 5 times 5 is 25. Remainder 1, we keep going. We put a decimal, put a 0, and bring it down. 5 goes into 10 twice, which is exactly that. So that means that x will equal to 5 and 2/10. 5 and 2/10. And that's it. That seems like a lot, but it really wasn't. All right, I wrote down my word fraction, pounds of meat for 5 people. I wrote down my ratio that was given to me, 2 over 5, 2 pounds of meat for 5 people. I wrote down the given information wherever it would go on an equivalent fraction, 13 people, so I would go on the denominator, and I needed to find out how many pounds for 13 people. And then I use cross multiplication to make an equation. 5x goes on one side, 2 times 13, which is 26, goes on the other. And then I just isolated the variable by dividing by 5, and that gave my answer. To show you how easy this is, let's do another one. Let's go ahead and do number 2. I encourage you to pause the video, try it on your own. So I'm assuming that you already tried it. If not, just follow along. All right, Jack was planting a tree. He was to dig a hole that was 3 feet deep for 5 feet high. Okay, deep and high. How deep should he dig the hole for a tree that is 17 feet high? All right, so important information here, ladies and gentlemen. He's planting a tree that is going to be 3 feet, 3 feet deep, 4 5 feet high. The question is, how deep, so we don't know how deep, should he dig for a tree that is 17 feet high? Okay, what are the two things that I'm comparing? It seems to be deep, or depth would be a better way to say it. Deep versus high, which is height. I'm just going to do deep and high. Very good. So what ratio of depth to height is given to me? We have 3 feet deep versus 5 feet high. 3 feet deep versus 5 feet high. And we're also given 17 feet high, and I decided to put high in the denominator, so that's where I'm going to put 17 feet high. And we are wondering, well, how deep is it if it's going to be 17 feet high? All right, now that we have our ratio lined up, let's go ahead and build an equation with this. So on one side, I'm going to have 5 times x. So I'm just going to write it down, 5 times x. On the other side, I'm going to have 3 times 17. You can work it out now or just write it down and then work it out later, 3 times 17. All right, so 17 times 3 is going to be 51. So really, on one side, we have 5x, and on the other side, we have 51. All right, and now let's just go ahead and isolate the variable. All right, let's go ahead and isolate the variable. The opposite, so I'm just going to work on this side. The opposite of multiplying by 5 is to divide by 5. That isolates the variable, but whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other side. I need to divide this side by 5 as well. So 51 divided by 5. Let me work that off on the side. 51 divided by 5. 5 goes into 5 once. Remainder 0. Bring down the 1. Oh, sorry, that's a 1. 5 cannot go into 1, so it goes into 1 0 times. It's very important. It doesn't fit into the 1. So now I have to keep doing. So I'm going to put a decimal, put a 0, bring it down. 5 goes into 10 twice. 5 times 2 is 10. Ladies and gentlemen, x is equal to 10.2. That means that if the tree is going to be 17 feet high, you must dig a trench that is 10.2, or a hole that is 10.2 feet deep. Awesome. Not too bad. Next one. All right, number 3, a certain shade of green paint. And again, I encourage you to pause this video, try it on your own. Maybe you can pause and go, maybe go one step at a time with me. You do it first and then play it and then see if you did the same thing I did. So a certain shade of green paint is made up of 5 parts yellow with 3 parts blue. 5 yellow, 3 blue. I have a feeling those are my 2 variables. If 2 cans of yellow are used, how many cans of blue should be used? That rhymes. No, it doesn't rhyme. It's the exact same word. Anyways, so let's go ahead and circle the important information. So we have 5 parts yellow. So I'm going to do that in yellow. 5 parts yellow mixed with 3 parts blue. 3 parts blue. The question then asks, so I'm going to put the question here in brackets. If 2 cans of yellow are used, how many cans of blue? So we don't know how many cans of blue should be used. All right, so the 2 things that we're comparing are yellow to blue. Okay, yellow to blue. And the ratio that is given to us is 5 parts yellow, 5 parts yellow, to 3 parts blue. 5 yellow, 3 blue. Any other important information here? Yes, 2 yellow cans are used. So I'm going to put 2 up here with the yellow. And we are wondering how many blue. How much blue do I need? Okay, so let's make our equivalent ratio. And to do that, we're going to cross multiply to make an equation. So again, step number one, let's cross multiply. So on one side, I have 5 and x. And now I'll put it on the other side this time. And the other side, I have 3 times 2. So 5 and x, I'm going to put that on one side, 5 times x. And then the other, I'm going to have 3 times 2, which is 6. I'm just going to write down 6 already. All right, so 6 is equal to 5x. Again, it does not matter on which side you put things, as long as on one side you have one of the cross products, and then the other side of the equation you have the other of the cross products. Let's go ahead and solve for x. Let's isolate the variable. The opposite of multiplying by 5 is to divide by 5. So I'm going to go ahead and divide by 5. I feel like we've done divided by 5 on the previous 2 problems too. Anyways, so, but whatever I do to one side, I must do to the other. So 5 by 5, that cancels. So x will have to equal whatever 6 divided by 5 is. I'm going to work that off here. 6 inside divided by 5. 5 goes into 6 once, remainder 1. Decimal, bring down to 0. 5 goes into 10 twice. 5 times 2 is 10. Ladies and gentlemen, that means that if I have 2 cans of yellow paint, then I'm going to need 1.2 cans of blue paint. Simple enough. So at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. I don't want this video to be too long, so that's questions 1, 2, and 3. Feel free to try the rest on your own, which are 4, 5, and 6. I will make a second video where I go through those, but try those on your own and then check your work with the video that I'm about to post if you're stuck in any one of these questions. So with that in mind, I will see you soon.